Sure.
Alright. I was told, don't worry about that stuff. With time and hard work, it will all dissipate. And those scenes of children who were chopped up like pieces of salami. Women opened with their fetuses laying there. Elderly people dying in your arms. And a mass movement of 50 or 60,000 in rain in the mountains. Looking into your eyes saying, what happened? Weren't you there? How did we end up like this? These are a few of Lieutenant General Romero de Laire's experiences during his Rwandan genocide. And as you guys have heard from two previous presenters, he went through some pretty traumatic stuff during this genocide. During this time, he was the force commander of the United Nations Observer Mission in Uganda and Rwanda, as well as the United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda. And this all started in 1993 for him, about a year before the genocide took place. For his actions during the Rwandan genocide, he received the Meritorious Service Cross, as well as the Vimy Award, United States Legion of Merit, the Pearson Peace Medal, and numerous honoris causa doctorates. Today I want to talk to you specifically about his impeccable character and how his military background was what gave him this character, but I want to focus specifically on the pain and the suffering that he ended up going through, and how his actions during the Rwandan genocide and after the Rwandan genocide really demonstrate that he had this really strong moral character. Before I get too far into that, I want to give you some background on the Rwandan genocide itself. So when General de Laire got to Rwanda, the situation was actually improving in the civil war between the Hutu governing officials and the Rwandan Patriotic Front. They had actually signed a peace deal, and so things looked pretty good. When he got there, he was in charge of 81 unarmed military observers and a major in the Canadian Air Force, or in the Canadian Army. So things didn't seem like there wasn't a large force, didn't need a large force because peace was ensuing. Everything changed on 6 April when a plane carrying the Hutu president was shot down. And I quote, "Hutu extremists blamed the Rwandan Patriotic Front and immediately started a well-organized campaign of slaughter." So we get this idea that the Hutu government possibly shot down the plane. There's a lot of chaos going on. We're not really sure what's happening. And then this mass genocide breaks out. And within the span of 100 days, approximately 800,000 people, Rwandans, were killed in this genocide. And 75% of them were the Tutsi population. So how did this all happen? Well, prior to the outbreak, General de Laire had actually pleaded with the UN officials to send any sort of aid or troops or anything. And this was based off of one of his informants telling him of this impending extermination that was going to happen. They were registering Tutsi population, and his informant believed that this was an indication that mass killings were going to ensue. So he pleaded with the UN, and they ended up saying no. They didn't send him any troops, they didn't send him really any aid. And it was such a tough situation for him. He couldn't even get chairs or desks for his people to sit and do their work in Rwanda. So they were sitting on the floor in a small shack doing their work. So the UN basically told him, cease and desist. Don't do anything. We don't want to get more involved after we've already had some previous failures in Africa. They didn't want to send any more troops or send any more aid. But General de Laire didn't let that stop him. Even though he couldn't get batteries to power flashlights, even though he couldn't get chairs and desks, he still did everything he possibly could. And he ended up saving and protecting about 30,000 lives with the minimal amount of resources he had, which is a pretty huge ordeal. He said, "Your mind with time, in fact, does not erase things that are traumas. It makes them clearer. They become digitally clearer, and then you're able to sit back and all of a sudden have every single image come to you. Scenes like walking into a church, carefully stepping over brutally mutilated bodies that were hacked by the cold, sharp steel of the machete blade. Scenes like walking into a small shack that was deemed the morgue and seeing potato sacks, pile of potato bags, and realizing that these weren't potato bags. They were actually the 10 Belgian soldiers that were recently killed. He said that he held on his shoulders the belief that as the commander of the mission in Rwanda, he had failed the Rwandans completely. And this impact actually physically affected him and mentally affected him so much that he didn't have any desire to live. And so this pain and the suffering that he experienced during the Rwandan genocide actually pushed him to attempt suicide a couple of times. But I want to argue that these suicidal attempts weren't just him trying to escape the pain and the suffering. They're really an illustration of the level that it affected him, the tragedy that he experienced, the scenes that he saw. And especially because he was unable to do a lot for the situation. He knew that there were going to be mass killings. He pleaded with the UN, and they failed him, and they didn't send him aid, and he did everything he possibly could, but he still held the weight of those 800,000 people on his shoulders. So instead of being able to close his eyes and kind of forget about the things that had happened, these were actually moments of extreme pain for him. He couldn't sleep. He had a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. But what he ended up doing as a result of this experience has changed the world. And that's really where we can see this strong moral character, is that he went through a lot of pain and suffering, and as a result, he took those experiences, he's done everything he possibly can to affect the rest of the world. So when he got back in 2000, he was actually medically released, and he began working for the Canadian government as well as the international community, talking about genocide, post-traumatic stress disorder, and war-affected children. With the genocide, he's done a lot of different talks, trying to just tell the world what happened with the Rwandan genocide, how it came to be, what happened during, and how we can take that experience and really use it to make sure that this kind of genocide doesn't happen again. With the PTSD, he's worked a lot with the Canadian veterans, especially the Army veterans there, talking about his experiences, going and meeting with them, kind of learning about their experiences, and trying to help walk with them through this difficult process, because he spent many of his years trying to walk through this process as well. And even today, he still is woken up at night just by the terror of what had happened and the images that come to his mind. And then with the war-affected children, he spent a lot of his time trying to find those kids who have been affected by war, who have had their houses taken away, their families taken away, and provide them these basic resources of shelter, family, food, water, things like that. So he's done a lot of work with that. So I argue that his character was developed first by the military background, and we can see that he used that being lieutenant general in the Army. But what he ended up doing with the pain and suffering that he experienced during the Rwandan genocide and afterwards is really what shows that moral character. And I want to leave you with a quote that he said. He said, "In command, there's no sort of in command. My failings, my inabilities, not taking advantage, lack of skills, it was all there. What could I have done better? Well, we could talk about that for hours. But there's one thing for damn sure. I was in the field. I commanded. I did not convince. I lost soldiers, and 800,000 people died. And there's no way of taking that away." Thank you.